Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
The Konoha Ninja Academy was a constant hive of murmurs, stifled laughter, and chalks banging against the blackboard. For the vast majority of the children who attended their classrooms, it was the first step towards glory, towards the opportunity to become legendary heroes. But for two students in particular, sitting at opposite ends of the classroom, the academy was nothing more than a tedious game of appearances. In the last row, near the window, Naruto Uzumaki was snoring with his head resting on the slut. A thread of drool trickled from the corner of his lips, and his garish orange jacket looked like a beacon of indiscipline. To the naked eye, he was the pariah of the village, the last one dead, the noisy clown who couldn't even execute a basic cloning jutsu without creating a deformed and pale illusion. However, behind those closed eyelids, Naruto's mind was working at a dizzying speed. He wasn't asleep. He was running an advanced internal chakra control exercise, separating his energy network into two flows, different, to try to balance his own chakra with the overwhelming and unstable red mass that resided sealed inside. Years ago, after sneaking into the restricted section of Konoha's library, using his cunning and agility to evade the Chunin duty, Naruto had discovered the truth about his tenant, the nine-tailed fox. Far from succumbing to panic or despair, the analytical mind of the young Uzumaki processed the information with a coldness frightening for his age. He understood the hatred of the villagers, the furtive glances of the and the false benevolence of the third cage. If he showed intelligence, if he proved to be the prodigy that his Uzumaki and Namikaze blood demanded him to be, he would become a target. The village council, or even worse, Konoha's darker roots, would turn him into a weapon with no wool. So Naruto forged a mask, the mask of the loud and harmless idiot. At the opposite end of the classroom, staring blankly at the clouds lazily floating across the sky, stood Shikami Nara. An heir to the Nara clan, Shikami was the embodied definition of apathy. She wore her long black hair up in a high messy ponytail, wearing a mesh t-shirt under a gray jacket. His dark, sharp eyes always seemed to be about too close for sleep. It was, according to all the instructors, a disappointment that wasted an innate tactical talent. But Shikami was not lazy because of lack of ability, but because of excess of it. His IQ was over 200 points. He analyzed every person in the classroom, their tics, their superficial chakra flows, their breathing patterns. And everything was terribly predictable to him. Everything except one person. Iruka Amino hit the table with a book, startling the class. "Naruto?" the teacher shouted, with a vein marking on his forehead. "Since you find my explanation about the chakra circulation so boring, why don't you come and explain to us the difference between the transformation of form and the transformation of nature?" Naruto jumped up, rubbing his eyes and laughing loudly, rubbing the back of his neck with that slutty smile that irritated half the class. "Ah, Iruka-sensei. That's cheating. I was dreaming about ramen," Naruto shouted, provoking the laughter of the classroom and the defeated sigh of Sakura and Sasuke. Iruka put a hand to his face. "Sit down, Naruto. You're a basket case." As Naruto sat down, his gaze met Shikami's for a split second. Shikami narrowed her eyes. There was something wrong. Uzumaki's chakra was not fluctuating like that of someone who has just woken up startled. His heart rate was exactly 60 beats per minute, perfect and constant. In addition, when Iruka asked the question, Naruto's left hand, hidden under the table, had instinctively traced the Rum's seal, the fundamental seal for shaping chakra before applying a shape transformation. He knew the answer. He knew her and had chosen to make a fool of himself. Problematic, Shikami muttered to herself, resting her chin on her hand. A spark of genuine interest was kindled in his bright mind. For the first time in 12 years, I had found a puzzle that I couldn't solve with a simple glance. That same afternoon, the sun was beginning to tinge the sky with orange tones. Shikami had skipped throwing practices. From shuriken, sneaking off to his favorite spot, in the woods outside the academy, a small clearing hidden by dense oak trees. As he approached, he heard the faint hum of chakra cutting through the air. He hid behind the thick trunk of a tree, suppressing his own chakra signature with the mastery of his clan, and peeked out. In the center of the clearing was Naruto. He wasn't wearing his loud orange jacket. He was wearing a tight black t-shirt and dark trousers. He was standing with his eyes closed. Around him, 5 tree leaves were floating in the air. They were not suspended by threads. They were held by 5 invisible chakra currents that Naruto controlled simultaneously from his fingers. Suddenly, Naruto opened his eyes. They were sharp, icy and warm from any childish stupidity. He made a quick movement with his wrist. The 5 leaves shot out towards 5 different trees, embedding themselves in the solid bark like steel blades. Shikami held her breath. Transformation of the extreme form combined with wind element, and remote chakra manipulation without a seal. Manuals. That level of control. It's from an elite Jotunin. I know you're there, Shikami, Naruto said, his voice low, calm, and devoid of his usual shrillness. Your chakra suppression is excellent, almost perfect. But you stepped on a pine leaf 10 meters from here. The rustling altered the wind pattern. Shikami sighed, coming out of hiding with his hands in his pockets, his face expressionless. Though his mind was working at maximum capacity. What a bummer, she said, walking towards the center of the clearing, until she was 2 meters away from him. So the clown at the academy is actually a chakra control prodigy. I guess the rumors about your jokes are also part of the charade. Painting the faces of the Tsukuges in broad daylight and evading the Zambu 4 hours. It was not a tantrum of a child seeking attention. It was a tactical exercise of infiltration and evasion. Naruto looked into her eyes. There was no hostility, just a mutual analysis. You're as smart as they say, Shikami. Even if you try really hard to look boring. It's less of a problem than dealing with other people's expectations, she replied, shrugging, and you? Why the mask, Uzumaki? If you show half of what I just saw, you would be the rookie of the year, not Yuki Sasuke. Naruto sat down on the grass, crossing his legs. He made a gesture with his hand, inviting her to sit down. Shikami hesitated for a second, but curiosity overcame caution. She sat down in front of him. The Uchiha clan has their prodigy, and look how their clan ended up, Naruto said coldly. If I, the orphan hated by the whole village for harboring a certain demonic fox inside, suddenly revealed myself as a tactical and military genius, what do you think the council would do? What do you think Danzo Shimura would do? They would take me to the depths of root and erase my mind to become their personal weapon. Shikami opened her eyes, genuinely surprised. For a 12-year-old to understand Konoha's darkest political machinations, and even know the existence of the Root faction, was unheard of. You play the fool to be underestimated, she reasoned, admiration slowly infiltrating her voice. So that the villagers will see you as a noisy nuisance instead of a threat, and so that the leaders will consider you too useless to be an effective weapon. Exactly. Stupidity is the best camouflage. Naruto smiled, but this time it was a genuine smile, small and reserved. You're the first person to find out. Shikami stared at him. In the evening light, Naruto's features looked different. Without the exaggerated grimace, his face was handsome, with a maturity that reflected years of solitude and reflection. And what happens now? She asked, tilting her head. You know I know your secret. I could tell my father, Shikaku. This is Commander Kotanin. Naruto shook his head gently. You won't. You're a Nara. You evaluate the risk and the benefit. Ratting on me would bring you lengthy interrogations, council attention, and endless days of paperwork. Too much trouble, right? Shikami let out a nasal laugh, a weirdness in her. You read me too well, Uzumaki. You're right. Your secret is safe with me. Keeping your mouth shut requires zero effort. Shikami reached into his backpack and pulled out a small folding shogi board and a box of pieces. He placed it on the grass between the two. Do you play? She asked. I read about the rules at the library. I've never played against a real person, Naruto admitted. I'll give you a head start. Shikami then began to arrange the wooden pieces. Let's see if your mind is as sharp on the board as it is on village politics. That afternoon in the woods marked the beginning of a secret alliance that quickly evolved into something much deeper. Over the next few months, her routine changed. In the academy, they were still the idiot and the lazy one, without crossing looks or words. But by evening, they were in the hidden clearing. In the beginning, Shikami won the shogi games with ease, crushing Naruto's defenses in less than 20 moves. However, Naruto's mind was like an adaptive sponge. He analyzed his defeats, memorized the Shikami patterns, and, by the end of the first month, managed to bring the games to absolute blocks or Pyrrhic victories. Shikami realized that Naruto did not play in an orthodox way. He used sacrificial tactics that a Nara would never consider, taking calculated risks to trap his king in brutal ambushes. It was a chaotic but mathematically precise style of play. One winter afternoon, the cold was freezing to the bone in the forest. They were in the middle of a tense match. Shikami was about to move his silver general to checkmate when Naruto moved his bishop, sacrificing it to open a direct line to Shikami's king with his rook. Checkmate, Naruto said quietly, with a satisfied smile on his face. Shikami blinked, analyzing the board. He had lost. The last dead man of the academy had just defeated the greatest intellect of the generation. Far from feeling frustrated, Shikami felt a shiver of pure fascination run down her spine. He looked up from the board and met Naruto's blue eyes, intense and warm. I was careless, she admitted, rubbing her cold hands and exhaling bow into the icy air. Naruto noticed his slight tremor. Without saying a word, she took off the dark scarf she was wearing around her neck and leaned forward, wrapping it gently around Shikami's neck. His knuckles brushed against her skin for a second, and they both felt an electric current that had nothing to do with the lightning element. Shikami stood transfixed, her dark eyes fixing on his. Naruto's face was just inches away from his. He could smell the slight scent of forest and ancient scrolls that always accompanied him. Don't get careless in the cold, Shikami whispered Naruto. His gaze pausing for a moment on her lips before backing away, resuming his position on the other side of the board. Shikami's heart beat with an unusual and strong, breaking his usual apathy. He took a hand to the scarf, which still retained Naruto's body heat, and a slight blush tinged his pale cheeks. At that exact moment, under the leafless trees of winter, they both knew that Shoji's board was no longer just an intellectual battlefield. It was the bridge that had united two souls that the outside world was unable to comprehend. Time progressed relentlessly until graduation day. The academy was full of tension and nervousness. Iruka called the students one by one to the exam hall to perform the cloning jutsu. When it was Naruto's turn, he entered the room with his usual slouched and carefree posture. Mizuki, the other instructor, was looking at him with poorly disguised contempt. Naruto channeled his chakra. He knew the illusory cloning jutsu perfectly, but he knew that it was useless for him. The immense volume of his Uzumaki chakra overloaded low-level techniques. So, turning to a B-level scroll he had memorized from the library weeks ago, he traced Cruz's seal. Kajibin Sin no Jutsu Jutsu Shadow Clone, Naruto muttered at a barely audible volume, so as not to give away the advanced technique. Two physical and perfect clones appeared next to him, although Naruto made them look a little wobbly on purpose. Iruka opened his eyes wide, amazed that Naruto had managed to create solid physical clones. Mizuki frowned, but she couldn't deny the approval. Approved, announced Iruka, handing Naruto a ninja band of the blade. Naruto walked out of the classroom with the sash in his hand, tying it to his forehead with a smile of secret satisfaction. The next day, the classroom was full of the new genin, waiting for the assignment of their equipment. Shikami was sitting in her usual place, with her head resting on the table. Naruto entered and sat next to Sasuke Uchiha, playing his role by fighting with the Uchiha and being comically beaten by Sakura. Shikami rolled her eyes, but a small smile appeared on his lips. No one else saw the precision with which Naruto had stumbled to avoid a real Sasuke blow, or how he had cushioned Sakura's blow. With a minimal flow of chakra on his cheek, Iruka started reading the list. Team 7, Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura at 1. And Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto celebrated in an exaggerated way, although inside he evaluated the situation. A prodigy Uchiha, and a kunoichi of civilian origin with excellent chakra control, but zero experience in real combat. An unbalanced team. The council expects Sasuke to be the mainstay, Sakura the medical or analytical support, and me. Cannon fodder. Typical. Team 10. Hino Yamanaka, Shikami Nara, and Ikimichi. Shikami let out a long sigh. The classic formation Inoshikage, predictable. What a bummer. He glanced sideways at Naruto. It would have been interesting to be on his team, but he knew that the village policy would never allow separating the Trinity from their clans. The Jonin instructors began to arrive. Asuma Sarutobi picked up Team 10, taking them to a barbecue restaurant. Team 7, however, was left waiting for hours in the empty classroom. Naruto was sitting at the teacher's desk. Sasuke was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and Sakura was walking back and forth, complaining. Naruto looked at the draft filled with pizza on the blackboard tray. With an inward smile, she placed it on the top edge of the ajar door. Naruto, our sensei is an elite prankster, he won't fall for such a childish trick. Sakura scolded him. Sasuke snorted. An idiot. Naruto didn't say anything. If our sensei is Kakashi Attack of the Sharingan, famous for his tardiness and apathy, he will fall into the trap on purpose. To give us a false sense of security and naivety. The door opened. A head with silver hair poked out, and the eraser fell directly on it with a thud, filling the air with chalk dust. Naruto burst into acted-out laughter. Sakura frantically apologized. Kakashi picked up the eraser, looked at the three genin with his only visible eye and sighed. My first impression of you. They're just a bunch of idiots. See you on the rooftop. Once on the roof, the presentations were brief. Kakashi didn't reveal anything about himself, and when it was Naruto's turn, he recited his rehearsed line about ramen and becoming Hokage, making sure to sound as childish as possible. Fine, Kakashi said, getting up. We will have our first exercise tomorrow. At training camp number 3. At 5 a.m. And a tip. Don't have breakfast or you'll throw up. Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Sasuke and Sakura left, tense from the warning. Naruto was left alone on the rooftop. The sun was beginning to descend. He had no intention of skipping breakfast. He knew from his readings in the Ambu tactical manuals courtesy of the Forbidden Section that the deprivation of food before a combat was a tactic of psychological attrition. A ninja with no calories in his system loses 40% of his chakra efficiency in the first hour. That night, under the starry mantle of Konoha, Naruto walked towards the forest clearing. Shikami was already there, sitting down, on a thick oak branch with the shoji board open on his knees. The moon lit up her pale face and deep-set eyes. Naruto jumped gracefully, landing next to him without making a single sound. How was it with Azuma? Naruto asked, moving a pawn. Food. He tried to bribe us with barbecue to analyze us. It was a bummer. Shikami moved his golden general, and you. You got Kakashi from the Sharingan. The ninja copies. A survival test tomorrow. He told us not to have breakfast. Naruto moved his tower forward. He plans to physically exhaust us to test us under stress. I'll have high-calorie density military rations for breakfast. And temporarily seal my digestive system with chakra so I won't feel nauseous during the impacts. Shikami looked at him, a curved and beautiful smile wowing on her lips. You're terrifyingly meticulous, did you know that? I have to be. If Kakashi Attack finds out my real level, the secret is over. I have to show him progress, but in a gradual way. I have to make him believe that he is teaching me to think. Shikami rested her chin on her hand, moving a little closer to him. In the silence of the forest, the chemistry between the two was palpable, a magnetic tension built on shared secrets. And a deep mutual understanding. Survive tomorrow, Naruto whispers, his voice losing all apathy, charged with a vulnerable honesty. You promised that one day we would play a game of shogi where the two of us could be the kings on the board. Don't starve to death before that. Naruto looked up from the dashboard. With a gentle movement, he took Shikami's hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. The temperature of her skin was a perfect contrast, the coldness of her shadow against the inexhaustible heat of his sun. I don't plan on losing, Shikami. Neither on the battlefield, nor on the board. Naruto approached, their foreheads almost touching. And when I'm strong enough so that no one in this village can threaten me, I'll drop the mask. And you'll be by my side when that happens. Shikami closed her eyes, nodding slowly, joining her forehead to his. It's a very problematic plan, Uzumaki. But I accept it. The next morning, the sun was just rising above the horizon. Sakura and Sasuke were sitting on the training ground, their stomachs roaring with hunger and their eyes shot with exhaustion. Naruto was sitting on the grass, seemingly just as tired, but inside, his energy was overflowing. He had consumed 3 bars of military ration, and his chakra flow was in perfect sync. Kakashi showed up at 10 in the morning. He explained the jingle bell test. The goal was simple: to remove one of the 2 bells before noon, or return to the academy. Let's get started. He ordered the kotanen. Sasuke and Sakura immediately hid in the trees. Naruto, playing his role, stood in front of Kakashi. I'm going to crush you head-on, Naruto shouted, throwing himself with a cradle and in hand. Kakashi sighed, taking out his orange book. Icha tactics. Naruto launched a series of clumsy and loud taijutsu attacks. Kakashi dodged them without taking his eyes off the book. At one point, Kakashi slipped behind Naruto, forming the seal of the tiger. Secret jutsu of the blade, 1,000 years of death. Naruto was thrown through the air, falling into the nearby river. Underwater, out of sight of the Jotanen, Naruto's face turned deadly. Fine. He already thinks I'm an impulsive idiot. Now, the second phase of the farce. While Kakashi humiliated Sasuke by burying him in the ground up to his neck, and trapped Sakura in a basic death genjutsu, Naruto emerged from the water. He moved through the forest in complete silence, suppressing his chakra signature the same way Shikami had taught him in his secret trainings. He climbed up a tree branch, watching the clearing. The test is not about stealing the bells, Naruto analyzed, his blue eyes razor-sharp. There are 3 genin and 2 bells. Mathematically, it is designed to create internal conflict and selfishness. The real goal is teamwork under the threat of failure. Naruto knew that if he revealed himself and orchestrated an advanced coordination tactic with Sasuke and Sakura, Kakashi would get suspicious. He had to force teamwork as crudely and loudly as possible to keep his mask. Naruto traced Cruz's seal. Kajeben without no jutsu. 10 clones appeared. But instead of attacking Kakashi, Naruto sent 5 clones towards Sasuke and 5 towards Sakura. In the forest, Sakura was paralyzed by the fear of genjutsu. A Naruto clone suddenly appeared, slapping her lightly. Wake up, Sakura-chan. It's a trick. The clone shouted with his usual shrillness. Sakura blinked, the genjutsu dissipating. He saw Naruto and grunted. You idiot, you almost scared me to death. There's no time. Kakashi-sensei is very strong. I need your help to ambush him. He asked for the clone, acting desperate. I will be the bait, you use your traps. Simultaneously, another group of clones unearthed Sasuke. Sasuke looked at the Naruto clones with disdain. I don't need your help, loser. If we don't work together, we will be sent back to the academy, he fears. The Naruto clone shouted at him, grabbing him by the shirt. You're good at fighting, I can create distractions. Use your head. Sasuke frowned. I hated to admit it, but the idiot had a point. The Jotanen was on another level. Minutes later, Kakashi was putting away his book, feeling that time was running out. Suddenly, 20 Naruto clones came out of the undergrowth, screaming and attacking head-on. He doesn't learn, Kakashi thought, taking them down one by one. But the clones weren't there to attack. They were there to blind Kakashi's field of vision. At the exact moment Kakashi dispelled the last clone in a cloud of smoke, a shower of shurikens, thrown by Sakura from the rear. forced him to jump back. And at the planned landing place, Sasuke was already in the air, having completed the hand seals. Kitange Kaki no Jutsu. Fire Element Jutsu Big Fireball. The immense sphere of flames engulfed Kakashi. Naruto, the original, was watching from the trees. He calculated the time perfectly. He's arrogant, but Sasuke has a good combat instinct. Kakashi, using a substitution, reappeared on a branch and lesso, but with a small burn on the sleeve of his Jotunnen vest. The doorbell rang, marking noon. Kakashi gathered the 3 exhausted genin into the clearing. Sasuke and Sakura were panting heavily. Naruto pretended to pant the same, although his breathing was perfectly controlled. They failed to get the bells, Kakashi said, in a stern voice. But, Naruto, you forced your teammates to work with you. Sakura, you created an opening. Sasuke, you took advantage of the opening without hesitation. Kakashi smiled under his mask. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum. But those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. They are approved. Team 7 starts their missions tomorrow. Sasuke smiled sideways. Sakura cried with joy. Naruto threw up his arms, screaming with excitement, playing the perfect clown. But when Kakashi turned around, the covered Sharingan eye of the Jotunnen seemed to stop for a microsecond. That teamwork was crude, but the timing of the Naruto clones to direct the attacks of the other 2. It was almost as if he was controlling the battlefield like a shogi board. Maybe I underestimated the last dead man. That same afternoon, the sun was beginning to set. Team 10, led by Asuma Sarutobi, was at a different training camp. Asuma was smoking a cigarette, looking at her new students. Chi was eating French fries, and not getting her hair done, and Shikami leaning against a tree, with her eyes closed. They had completed a basic training test, and Shikami's brilliance in coordinating Hino's mind and Kai's strength had left Suma impressed, although she didn't stop complaining about how problematic everything was. Well done, guys. They have the potential to be the best generation in Oshikosh. You can go home, Asuma said. Hino and Chi said goodbye. Shikami walked with a lazy step towards the village, but at the first street junction, he turned off to the outskirts, towards the forest clearing. When we arrived, the moon was already high in the sky. Naruto was sitting on the grass, in front of the already assembled shogi board. Shikami came over and sat down in front of him. I approved, Shikami said in a flat voice. Asuma is a good leader. He smokes too much, but he can read tactics. Kakashi also approved of us. Naruto moved the first pawn. I manipulated him into believing that teamwork was an accident born out of desperation. He swallowed it whole. Shikami smiled, moving her own piece. You are a manipulative monster, Uzumaki. I only protect my pieces on the board, Nara replied him, his tone becoming soft, intimate. Under the silvery moonlight, the hero who carried the hatred of the world, and the shadow who refused to walk under expectations, continued their eternal dance. They were 2 geniuses hidden in plain sight, forging a bond of love and steel that soon, when the world was ready for the truth, would change the history of the elemental nations forever. The first few weeks as genin were, in a word that Shikami would use constantly, an absolute bummer. For Team 7, life came down to catching stray cats, pulling weeds and cleaning up trash from the Konoha River. Sakura was complaining about the mud on her clothes, Sasuke was seething with silent frustration at feeling like he was wasting his time. And Naruto. Naruto was complaining louder than anyone, yelling about how he deserved S-rank missions and real ninja missions. But as always, the reality behind the facade was very different. In the stillness of the night, under the dense foliage of the training forest, Naruto and Shikami kept up their ritual. The shogi board was arranged on a flat rock, lit only by the light of the full moon that filtered through the leaves. You move your pawn too fast, Naruto muttered Shikami, resting his cheek on his hand, his dark eyes scanning the board. You're anxious. Kakashi is wearing them down with D-rank missions, and your patience is running out. Naruto sighed, dropping his mask completely. His face relaxed, losing the comical grimace and adopting an icy and calculating seriousness. It's a softening tactic, Shikami. The third cage assigns degrading missions to the newly graduated genin to crush their ego and teach them discipline. But in my team, it is achieving the opposite effect. Sasuke is becoming more arrogant and isolated because he thinks the system is holding him back. Sakura is losing the military interest and focusing only on chasing Sasuke. And me. And you have to act like the hyperactive idiot who doesn't understand the value of hard work, Shikami completed. Moving his silver general. Which mentally exhausts you twice as much. Naruto nodded, moving his rook in an unusual defensive move. I'm going to force Elder Okage's hand tomorrow. I'm going to throw a tantrum of epic proportions at the allotment office. I know the psychological profile of Irizen Sarutobi. If I push hard enough with the argument of showing my worth, his weakness for me will make him give in. And give us a C-rank mission escort or supply transport. I need to get out of the village, Shikami. I need to test my chakra flow theories in real combat without the constant vigilance of the Zambu. Shikami looked up from the board. Her eyes met his in the gloom. A mission outside the walls is unpredictable, Naruto. C-rank missions are supposed to have no ninja combat, but bandits or mercenaries are always a factor. Naruto smiled slightly, a confident and sharp smile. Are you worried about me, Nara? Shikami clicked his tongue and averted his gaze, although a very slight blush betrayed his usual mask of apathy. You're my only decent rival in the shogi, Uzumaki. If you get killed out there because you were too busy pretending to be a fool, I'll have to play against my dad again. And that's too problematic. Naruto let out a low, soft laugh, a sound only she knew. He leaned over the board and caught Shikami's hand before she could withdraw her piece. The touch was electric on the cold night. I promise to come back in one piece, Shikami. But don't get too bored while I'm gone. Asuma is insightful, don't let him notice that your mind is 10 steps ahead of him. Shikami squeezed Naruto's hand gently, their fingers interlacing for a fleeting, secret instant. Alone. Don't die, you brilliant idiot. Checkmate. Naruto blinked and looked at the board. He had been so intent on her eyes that he did not see the movement of his bishop. He smiled, shaking his head. She always managed to surprise him. The next morning, Naruto's plan was executed with the precision of a watchmaker. In the office of the Okage, after refusing another babysitting mission, Naruto threw himself on the floor, kicked and screamed at the top of his lungs. And Irizen Sarutobi, rubbing his temples and exhaling smoke from his pipe, finally gave in, just as the blonde had predicted. That's enough. He ordered the third cage. I'll give you a C-rank mission. You'll be a bodyguard for a bridge builder. The office doors opened, and an old man who reeked of cheap shot came staggering in. What is this? Complained Tazuna, the bridge builder, taking a drink from his bottle. I asked for girls, not a ball of brats. Especially that idiot-faced dwarf. Naruto, playing his role, became comically enraged and tried to throw himself at Tazuna, being held back by Kakashi. But internally, the mental Yakugan of Naruto's intelligence was scanning the old man. He smells strong alcohol to mask his nervousness. His hands are shaking, and it's not because of the drink. It's adrenaline. The calluses on his hands are from a builder, yes, but his defensive posture, and the way he looks at the exits of the room. This man is terrified. Someone is chasing him. A poor bridge builder from the Wave Country doesn't have the money to pay for a rank mission. I see as lying about the range of the threat to get cheap escort. How troublesome. Shikami would laugh if she saw this. Hours later, Team 7 and Tazuna left the gates of Konoha. The journey began quietly, but Naruto kept his senses alert. He had been practicing a chakra sensitivity exercise taught in the End Scrolls, expanding his energy network through the soles of his feet towards the earth, allowing him to feel the vibrations from miles away. Suddenly, on the side of the dirt road, Naruto noticed a puddle of water. Water. On a sunny day, without having rained in a week, on a land with excellent drainage. And the flow of chakra emanating from that puddle is dense. Basic illusion combined with water element. Ambush imminent. Naruto didn't warn his team. If he did, Kakashi would immediately become suspicious. Instead, Naruto walked straight into the puddle, pretending to be distracted by a butterfly, but positioning his body at a perfect angle to repel an attack. As we passed by the puddle, two hooded figures emerged from the water, with steel chains adorned with sharp blades. The demon brothers of the mist. The chains wrapped themselves around Kakashi in an instant, tightening with brutality, and tearing the Kotanen's body into bloody pieces. Sakura screamed, terrified. Tazuna froze. Sasuke was shocked for a split second before he unsheathed a kunai. The assassins rushed towards Naruto, with him being the closest target. "Now it's your turn, Mikoto." One of the brothers roared, throwing his chain. Naruto screamed, feigning blind panic, and let himself fall backwards, stumbling awkwardly. But it wasn't a stumble. It was a fall calculated to the millimeter. The killer chain passed within an inch of his nose, missing the target completely. As he fell, Naruto waved his arms comically, but from his sleeve, a cradle and shot out, apparently by accident. The cradle and flew, and embedded itself exactly in the central link of the chain that united the two brothers, sticking it firmly into the trunk of an immense oak, immobilizing the machinery of his weapon. Sasuke, regaining his composure, saw the accidental opening that Naruto had created. The Uchiha jumped on the killer's arms, and kicked them in the face simultaneously, looking incredibly skilled. A second later, Kakashi reappeared, and less so. The mangled body had been a simple substitution jutsu using wooden logs. Kakashi knocked out the two brothers in the blink of an eye, tying them to a tree. "Good job, Sasuke. Sakura, you were good to cover for Tazuna." Kakashi looked at Naruto, who was still on the ground, trembling falsely. "Naruto. I'm sorry I didn't intervene sooner, but I let them get closer to find out their goal." "You got hurt." Kakashi pointed to the back of Naruto's hand. A slight scratch from the poison claw of the assassins had cut him off. Naruto groaned, holding his hand. Internally, he smiled. "The chain was neutralized by me, but I let Sasuke take the glory to feed his ego and keep his attention away from my actions. The poison in my hand is not a problem. The Karama chakra is already dissolving it at the cellular level. But this is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate character growth without revealing my intellect." Naruto pulled out a crib and, with a melodramatic scream, stabbed the back of his own hand, causing the blood to flow profusely, washing away the remaining poison. "I swear an oath of pain." Naruto shouted, his gaze burning with false determination. "I will never be a hindrance again. I will protect this old man." Kakashi looked at him, surprised by the drastic action, but nodded approvingly. The deception was complete. No one suspected that the accident with the kuna and on the chain had saved Sasuke from a lethal counterattack. After a tense conversation, where Tazuna finally confessed the truth about Gato, the ruthless tycoon who controlled the country of waves, Team 7 continued their advance, crossing the misty waters towards the island country. As they moved through the dense humid forest of the island, Naruto's mind worked tirelessly. The demon brothers were Sin Simple Chunin. If Gato has the resources of a transportation tycoon, he won't stop there. He will send elite Jainin. I must be ready. And then, the air became heavy. A murderous intent so dense that it made Sasuke's skin stand on end, and Sakura started to shake. "Get down on the floor," Kakashi shouted. An immense sword, as wide as a door and as sharp as a razor, whizzed past their heads, chopping down the trees in its path, before embedding itself in the trunk of a massive oak tree. On the hilt of the sword, a tall man appeared, with the lower half of his face covered by bandages, and the band of the mist torn on his forehead. Zabuza Momoki, the demon of the hidden mist. The ensuing combat was controlled chaos for Kakashi, but a nightmare for the Genin. Kakashi was forced to reveal his Sharingan, exchanging lethal blows with the mercenary swordsman. However, Zabuza was a master of silent murder. Using the Nymph, Kirigakure no Jutsu ninja art jutsu of concealment in the fog, Zabuza enveloped the forest in a haze so thick that visibility was reduced to zero. Kakashi, in a moment of distraction to protect his students, was kicked into a nearby lake. Zabuza, forming them at a breakneck speed, trapped the Kotanen of the blade in an inescapable water prison, his Hironuyutsu. The game is over, Kakashi teased Zabuza. Zabuza, keeping one hand on the water sphere, while creating a water clone to deal with the children. Now, I'll kill the brats and the old man. Zabuza's water clone pounced on them. In one fell swoop, he sent Naruto flying through the air, causing his ninja band to fall to the ground. Sasuke tried to attack with desperate fury, but was crushed almost instantly, his throat under the immense boot of Zabuza's water clone. Run away. He managed to shout Kakashi from inside the water prison, they can't beat him. His mission was to protect Tazuna. Sakura was crying, paralyzed. Sasuke was spitting blood, terrified. Naruto, lying on the wet dirt floor, closed his eyes for a second. This is the limit, his cold mind thought, suppressing the fear with pure mathematical logic. If Kakashi dies, everyone dies. We'll go. If I reveal my real level, Kakashi will inform the council. I must create a strategy that will free Kakashi, using a method that seems impulsive and childish, but is tactically impeccable. Naruto stood up. Instead of running, he tied the ninja band tightly to his forehead. Hey, eyebrowless freak. Naruto shouted, pointing to the water clone of Zabuza. Write this down in your little book. The man who's going to kick your ass is Naruto Uzumaki. Sasuke looked at him like he was crazy. Naruto didn't waste any time. He formed the Seal of Cruz. Kajeben without no jutsu. Dozens of clones appeared, surrounding Zabuza's water clone, and launching themselves at him in a disorderly and chaotic assault. It was a wall of bodies. Zabuza's water clone began to destroy the Naruto clones with wide movements of his sword, sending clouds of smoke everywhere. In the midst of that smoke and visual chaos, the real Naruto slipped next to Sasuke. He threw a F-Masherkin shuriken of demon-possessed wind closed on him. Sasuke. Naruto shouted. Sasuke caught the gun. For a split second, their eyes met. Despite his arrogance, Sasuke's tactical intellect deciphered the intent in Naruto's gaze. It wasn't the look of a scared idiot, it was the silent order of a commander on the battlefield. Sasuke opened the huge shuriken. Cage shuriken, no jutsu. Shadow shuriken jutsu. Sasuke threw the gigantic weapon, but did not aim at the water clone. He aimed at the real Zabuza, who kept his hand on the water prison, unable to move without freeing Kakashi. The F-Masherkin turned lethally towards Zabuza. The swordsman simply extended his free hand and caught the weapon through the central hole. But in the blind spot of the shadow of the first shuriken, there was coming a second F+ hidden shuriken. Zabuza opened his eyes wide and, with an agile movement, jumped up, dodging the second shuriken. A brat trick won't work on me. Zabuza laughed. But Naruto had already won. The second F+ shuriken, passing by Zabuza's position, did not continue its trajectory. In an explosion of white smoke, the immense metal shuriken transformed. It was Naruto Uzumaki. He had used the smoke cloud from his initial clones to use a transformation jutsu to become the weapon, giving it to Sasuke to throw. In the air, behind Zabuza's back, Naruto took out a kunai and threw it directly at the swordsman's face. Zabuza was forced to withdraw his hand from the water sphere to dodge the sharp blade, or he would lose an eye. As he separated his hand, the water prison collapsed into a harmless torrent. Kakashi was free, coughing, but immediately blocked Zabuza's huge saber with his metal protections. The plan had worked perfectly. Naruto fell into the water with a big splash, laughing like a lucky kid. I cheated on you, big guy. Naruto shouted. Kakashi looked at him in pure amazement. That plan. Using shadow clones as a physical distraction to cover up a transformation jutsu, passing the responsibility of the throw to Sasuke. To take advantage of his projectile skill, and using a blind spot attack to force the release from prison without engaging in direct combat. It was pure luck and desperation, but this guy hides a brilliant mind. Freed, Kakashi quickly copied Zabuza's water element jutsu, using the Sutanda and Bakufuno Great Waterfall jutsu to obliterate the mist swordsman, crashing him into a massive tree. Zabuza was defeated, pinned to the tree by kunai, barely breathing. Kakashi stepped up to deliver the final blow. Suddenly, two acupuncture needles shot out of the trees, plunging into Zabuza's neck. The swordsman fell to the ground, apparently dead instantly. A young man dressed in a kimono and a hunter's mask descended from the branches. Ambu from the village of the mist. I had been tracking Zabuza for a long time, the hunter spoke in a soft androgynous voice. I thank them for weakening him. His body holds many secrets of our village. I'll take him. The hunter lifted the massive body of Zabuza with a force and unbecoming for its size and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Kakashi, exhausted from the overuse of the Sharingan, collapsed on the floor, passed out. Sasuke and Sakura ran to their sensei. Naruto stood there, staring at the pool of blood that Zabuza had left behind. His blue eyes sharpened, calculating data at a fierce speed. To Emben in the neck. They didn't puncture any major arteries or the trach. Ambu hunters specialize in destroying the corpse on the spot to prevent secrets from being stolen. They never take away such a massive body if they can disintegrate it right there. In addition, the hunter lifted a man of almost 100 kilograms with one arm with no signs of muscular effort or expansive chakra, indicating perfect control of the internal flow. Conclusion: the needles were not lethal. They targeted the nerves to induce a state of apparent death. Zabuza is alive, and that hunter is his ally and medical apprentice. Naruto didn't say a word about his conclusions. He kept the secret in his analytical mind. Kakashi would find out later, but if he said it now, it would irreversibly break his facade. Hours later, Team 7 arrived at Tazuna's house, carrying the unconscious Kakashi. Tazuna's daughter Tsunami received them and took care of the Jotunin. The next day, Kakashi woke up and, after a few minutes of analysis, came to the same conclusion that Naruto had deduced in the first second. Zabuza was alive. Kakashi got out of bed, limping, leaning on a crutch. We have about a week before Zabuza fully recovers from the needle-induced paralysis, Kakashi informed his students. I will train them so that they can face him and his apprentice. Kakashi took them to the forest and explained the exercise of climbing trees without using hands, concentrating an exact amount of chakra on the soles of the feet. If they used a lot, the bark would break and they would shoot out. If they used too little, they would slip. Sakura succeeded on the first try, demonstrating her excellent, though limited, control. Sasuke managed to climb a couple of meters before slipping, frustrated. Naruto, applying his chakra to the soles of his sandals, ran towards the tree. Internally, his control was so perfect that he could have walked to the tip of the highest branch on his first attempt. However, before reaching the second meter, he intentionally withdrew 10% of the necessary chakra. He slipped and fell on his back to the ground, rubbing his head and complaining loudly. This is very difficult, Kakashi-sensei. He whined. Sasuke smiled arrogantly, satisfied that he was better than the loser. Kakashi sighed. That night, while Sasuke continued to thwart himself against the tree until he fell exhausted and the rest of the house slept, Naruto crept out of his bedroom window. He went deep into the forest, miles from Tazuna's house, making sure no one was following him. Arriving at a clearing hidden by the night fog, the mask fell. Naruto stretched out, feeling his muscles relax after a whole day of acting clumsily. He climbed a 30-meter pine tree, walking upside down on the main branch, without a single hint of effort. When he reached the cup, he sat down, contemplating the full moon that was reflected in the water in the distance. I wish Shikami was here, Naruto suddenly thought. The idea took him by surprise. I missed the shogi games. She missed the one moment of the day where she didn't have to pretend, where a brilliant mind communicated with hers, without the need for excessive words. She wondered if she too would be looking at the moon from her room in Konoha. To clear his mind of sentimentalities, Naruto went down to the ground and began his real training. He unrolled a blank scroll and picked up a paintbrush. The discipline of the F in jutsu sealing techniques of his clan, the Uzumaki, ran through his blood. He had been deciphering complex formulas in secret. For 2 hours, he traced advanced storage seals, modifying the flow matrices, so that they could absorb residual chakra from the environment and turn it into remote activation paralyzing seals. Once his scrolls were finished, he moved on to physical conditioning, making stamps. of isometric tension exercises using shadow clones to create gravitational resistance. It was during this training, almost at dawn, that his acute sensory perception detected a chakra approaching. Quickly, Naruto lay down on the grass floor and closed his eyes. Pretending to sleep, he heard the sound of someone picking herbs. He opened one eye. It was the Ambu hunter who had saved Zabuza, but now he was wearing pink civilian clothes with his long dark hair down. Aku! Naruto sat up, pretending to have suddenly woken up and enjoying his eyes, adopting his boisterous attitude. "What are you doing here so early, huh?" Naruto asked, screaming. Aku looked at him with a kind and melancholy smile. "I collect medicinal herbs. There is someone very important to me who is injured. I have to take care of him." Naruto, keeping his clueless boy facade, bowed his head. "Anyone important? You mean your boyfriend? Wow, you really are pretty," Naruto exclaimed in a squeaky voice. Internally, Naruto was scanning Aku. The shape of the neck muscles, the clavicular structure, the lower abdominal breathing pattern. Biologically, he is a man. And those herbs in your basket are monkshood and belladonna root, used to reduce severe inflammation in the muscular and nervous system. Post-paralysis treatment. Zabuza is close. Aku and Naruto shared a deep conversation about what it means to become strong to protect someone important. Aku spoke about his devotion to Zabuza. Naruto talked about his desire to protect his village. "You will become very strong," Aku told her, getting up to leave. Giving him one last smile. "Oh, by the way, I'm a man." Aku disappeared into the fog of the forest. Naruto was left alone. The awkward grimace disappeared from his face, replaced by an absolute tactical coldness. He has an incorruptible ideal and a devotion. Absolutely towards Zabuza. He will not hesitate to kill to protect him. That boy's chakra has an icy, unnatural signature. A Kato and Genka and bloodline limit related to ice or temperature. The confrontation on the bridge will be a bloodbath. The days flew by. Naruto and Sasuke managed to do the tree climbing exercise. By the end of the week, the Tazuna Bridge was almost finished, but the calm ended abruptly. The morning of the confrontation, Naruto stayed behind, sleeping, allowing Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura and Tazuna to get ahead towards the bridge. But as soon as the team crossed the threshold of the house, Naruto opened his eyes. He quickly unrolled his sealing scrolls under his clothes, prepared a squad of 5 shadow clones hidden in the surroundings of the forest as an alarm system, and rushed out in the direction of the bridge at a speed that it would make a fool of it. When we arrived in the vicinity of the bridge under construction, a dense magical fog covered everything. Zabuza had returned. Hidden between the steel pillars of the bridge, Naruto surveyed the battlefield. Kakashi was confronting. "It is whipped up again." But the real nightmare was happening a few meters away. Sasuke was trapped inside a gigantic ice mirror dome. The Makish, ice crystals of demonic mirrors. Aku, reflected in each and every mirror simultaneously, was throwing showers of senbon at the speed of light against the Uchiha. Sasuke, despite his incredible abilities, and having woken up the two-bladed Sharingan in the middle of combat, was losing blood rapidly. He was being gunned down. Naruto knew it was time to intervene, but he had to do it his way. If he knocked down the mirrors from the outside with a high-level wind jutsu, he would reveal his years of secret training to Kakashi and Zabuza. If Sasuke saw Naruto saving him as an almighty god, Lucia's pride would tear him apart, or it would make him a dangerous opponent. He had to act like a reckless, stupid hero, but driven by raw emotions. Naruto ran towards the ice dome, screaming at the top of his lungs. "Sasuke, I'm here to save the day," he shouted, uselessly throwing shurikens against the outside of the mirrors, which bounced off without making a scratch. Aku stopped his attack for a second, surprised by the newcomer's stupidity. Sasuke, bloodied inside, yelled at him, "You idiot. You should have attacked him from the outside by surprise. It doesn't make any noise." Feigning ignorance and blind bravery, Naruto simply ran and sneaked inside the ice mirror dome, getting trapped next to Sasuke. "I came to save you, and that's how you thank me, fear." Naruto shouted at Sasuke, bumping into his back. Kakashi, from a distance, and in the middle of his match with Zabuza, mentally hit his forehead. Naruto is too reckless. He's walked into the trap. But inside the ice dome, Naruto's mind processed everything in fractions of a second. Temperatures below zero. The crystal structure of these mirrors is infused with the water and wind chakra of Aku. They will not melt with normal fire. Aku moves between the mirrors at light speeds, but its exit point is always the geometric center of the ice panel. Before being projected, Embens do not target vital organs. Aku is merciful. He's torturing us to incapacitate us, not to kill us. Aku resumed the attack. A storm of needles rained down on both genin. Naruto let several Zenbun hit his arms and legs, screaming in pain to fuel his roll. Although Kurama's chakra was already sealing the blood vessels to minimize the damage. Sasuke, activating his Sharingan, tried to push Naruto to protect him, receiving a massive burst of needles into his own body. The Uchiha fell to the ground, spitting blood, his eyes closing, apparently dead. Sasuke, Naruto muttered, falling to his knees next to his companion's body. This was the perfect alibi. If I break this ice dome using overwhelming force and reveal lethal techniques, the council will demand to know who trained me. But if power is justified as an uncontrolled outburst of anger provoked by the pain of losing my partner, it will be seen as an instability of the nine tails. Fear, yes, but not hidden intelligence. The third cage will pass it by as an inevitable accident. Naruto lowered his head. He let his mind connect subtly with the seal on his stomach. Just one drop. I don't want to lose consciousness, I just need the cloak. You killed him. Naruto snarled. The temperature inside the dome, already freezing, changed radically. A suffocating pressure, ancient, and charged with an ancestral hatred, filled the air. A red, bubbling chakra began to seep out of Naruto's pores. His wounds healed by forcibly ejecting the needles. His nails lengthened into claws, his teeth into fangs, and his blue eyes were devoured by an effort. Intense scarlet with torn pupils. Naruto raised his face towards Aku, roaring like a wild beast. But behind those red eyes, Naruto's mind was a calm lake, a cold and merciless calculator. The Kurama chakra is caustic and of high density. I will use this feigned derangement to destroy the structural convergence points of the mirrors. Aku, terrified by the monstrous presence, threw dozens of senbon. Naruto didn't even dodge them. The red chakra formed a shield that evaporated the ice needles before they touched it. Naruto lunged forward, roaring with feigned madness. Aku tried to jump to another mirror. But Naruto didn't hit the mirror blindly. Under the cloak of rage, his chakra claws became embedded in the geometric microcracks of the ice. He injected a violent vibration of element, wind mixed with the red chakra, directly into the energy knots of the Kik and Genkai. The impact was catastrophic. Not a single mirror was broken. The energy feedback broke the balance of the entire dome. The ice crystals of demonic mirrors exploded in millions of harmless fragments that rained down on the bridge like snow. Aku was thrown through the air, his hunter mask shattered, landing painfully on the concrete of the bridge. Naruto ran towards him, growling, raising his red chakra-laden fist, stopping within a millimeter of the red. Terrified of the ice boy, Naruto took a deep breath, allowing Kurama's chakra to retreat into him. His eyes turned blue again. He dropped to his knees, panting, looking at Aku with an expression of confusion and horror at what his rage had made him do. You stopped me, Aku whispered, understanding his defeat. Kill me. I don't serve Zabuza anymore. Naruto frowned, clenching his fists, morally debating on his facade. Meanwhile, at the other end of the bridge, Kakashi had immobilized Zabuza and was about to pierce her heart. With his supreme killing technique, the lightning blade Reikiri, Aku perceived it. In a final burst of devotion and chakra, the young man used the ice mirrors to teleport directly in front of Zabuza. Kakashi's lightning blade pierced through Aku's heart, killing him on the spot to save his precious master. The rest of the battle unfolded quickly. Gato appeared with an army of hundreds of cowardly mercenaries, betraying Zabuza and ordering his death now that he didn't have his human weapon. Zabuza, moved to tears by Aku's sacrifice and Naruto's harsh but feigned words of reproach, took a cradle and in his mouth. With broken arms, he launched like an enraged demon at Gato's army, slaughtering dozens before beheading the corrupt tycoon. Zabuza died moments later, falling next to Aku's body under an unnatural snow. The Konoha team survived. Sasuke woke up shortly after, revealing that Aku's needles had bypassed his vital organs on purpose. Naruto, standing by the graves of Zabuza and Aku at the top of the cliff, looked at the immense covered sword. And Kirip, nailed to the ground like a monument. He cried falsely, making loud promises about his ninja way. But in the silence of his genial mind, Naruto Uzumaki's resolve hardened like steel. The shinobi world is a place where tools kill other tools. For the benefit of cowards who sit on thrones. Zabuza and Yaku died because they were pawns on the cat board. I will not be a pawn, and I will not allow the people I care about to be one. The trip back to Konoha was smooth. The bridge, now completed, would be named after El Gato. Count Naruto? When the heavy wooden doors of Konoha closed behind them, the routine of Team 7 seemed to resume. Sasuke was revered for having survived and awakened his Sharingan, and Naruto was again the object of general contempt, for having lost control and being a danger, a chiz. Me that quickly spread to the Kotanen. That same night, Naruto sneaked out of his apartment. The forest outside was bathed in silver by the moonlight. When he reached his hidden clearing, he saw the slim figure of Shikami, sitting on the root of the old oak tree, with the Shojila board arranged. Seeing him, Shikami didn't say anything. She analyzed his posture, the small scratches on his clothes, and the abysmal darkness that he hid behind the mask, that he let fall before her. Naruto approached, but did not sit on the other side of the board. He walked straight towards her and dropped down on the grass, leaning his back against the same trunk, next to Shikami. Shikami exhaled a sigh, putting the board pieces away in his box. I knew tonight wasn't about strategy. There was blood, Shikami muttered, an affirmation, not a question. Mucha, replied Naruto, his voice hoarse, devoid of any childish tone. I saw a boy my age sacrifice his life by throwing himself against a rank-and-file assassination jutsu, just so that his master, a ruthless killer, could live a few more minutes. And I saw that murderer cry when he realized that he loved him too late. Shikami looked at the moon through the branches. She, as the heiress of a girl clan, knew death in theory, but the rawness in Naruto's voice was the real world pounding with fury. Naruto turned his head to look at her. Shikami's dark eyes met his. In them, Naruto saw neither pity nor repulsion. He saw a deep and sharp understanding, a refuge where he did not have to be the hero of prophecy or the monster of the village. I had to pretend that the Kyuubi's fury blinded me so I could break a Kik and Genkai's ice mirror jutsu. Without revealing that I know how to manipulate chakra frequency resonance, Naruto confessed, closing his eyes in frustration. Acting like an out-of-control idiot while watching Sasuke bleed to death. It's getting harder and harder, Shikami. This mask set is suffocating me. Shikami did not offer him empty words of comfort. She moved her hand and placed it gently on his, interlacing her fingers with a firmness that surprised the blonde. A king who shows his strength before he has his defenses ready is a dead king, Naruto told her, his voice soft but unwavering. The world out there is ruthless, and Konoha is no different in its shadows. If you suffocate now, Danzo or the elders will take advantage of your vulnerability. Naruto squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin, the only anchor that kept him sane in that ocean of necessary lies. I know, Naruto whispered, moving closer to her until their shoulders touched. But sometimes, I wonder how long I'll have to be the last one dead before I can show them who I really am. Shikami smiled slightly, a small, private smile that she kept only for him. He rested his head on Naruto's shoulder. The necessary time. And as long as you play that loud and stupid role in front of them. Shikami looked up, his lips barely millimeters from Naruto's face. I will continue to play the role of the lazy and boring girl. We will be the two hidden pieces on this board. And when the time comes, we'll checkmate together. Naruto couldn't resist anymore. The admiration, respect, and overwhelming attraction I felt for that brilliant mind and indomitable spirit overflowed. He removed the distance and kissed her. It wasn't a clumsy or hasty kiss. It was slow, deep, and charged with an intellectual and physical intimacy that had been building for months in the silence of that forest. Shikami answered him with equal intensity, wrapping her arms around his neck, letting the shadow and the sun merge into the perfect darkness. When they separated, the breathing of both was agitated, but their minds were clearer than ever. The mission in the Land of Waves had forged Naruto Uzumaki in the fire of real combat, but it was there, in the arms of Shikamenara, where his real revolution, secret, lethal, and calculating, began. To put down roots. The shinobi world was not prepared for the genius monster hiding under the orange paint, nor for the mastermind in the shadows that would guide it to the top. The weeks following the mission in the Land of Waves passed in a deceptive monotony. Konoha had returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere in the village began to become dense, charged with a silent electricity. Shinobi from other elemental nations, wearing vests and bands with emblems of sand, rain, and grass, walked freely through the streets. The Shinigami had arrived at the Hidden Leaf Village. In the secret clearing of the forest, hidden under the dense foliage, Naruto and Shikami held their evening meeting. Shoji's board was open on the rock, but neither of them had moved a piece in the last 10 minutes. They were analyzing information. My father has been checking the participant lists along with the Okage, Shikami commented. Lying on the grass with her hands crossed behind her head, looking at Naruto, who was sitting cross-legged. There's something that doesn't fit. The village of the sand has sent the sons of the Kasuke. Gaara, the youngest, has an unstable chakra signature. It smells like blood, Naruto. They are not here just for a promotion exam. Naruto nodded, his face hardened by concentration. I saw him this afternoon in the village. Sasuke almost got into a fight with the one with the puppet, Kanker. I felt the Gahara chakra. He's a Hinshriki, Shikami. The defense arena he uses has a will of its own. Shukaku of a tail. Shikami opened her eyes, the surprise breaking her listless facade for a second. She sat up and sat down in front of him. If the arena sends an unstable Hinshriki to some exams in the heart of Konoha, it's a demonstration of power. Or a Trojan horse. This will become very problematic. It's not the only problem. Naruto took a pawn from the board and spun it between his fingers. There is a team from the village of Sound. A new, minor village. But their chakra signatures are artificially modified. And his squad leader, although he wears a disguise and suppresses his presence, was moving in the register today. With the lightness of an assassin of S rank. Shikami frowned. You're saying that these exams are a cover for a large-scale attack. It's the perfect time. All the defenses are focused on diplomacy, and the Naruto show put the pawn back on the board. Kakashi signed us up for Team 7 today. If I assume that the attack is imminent, I will have to decide when to drop my mask to protect the village. Shikami leaned over the board, approaching Naruto. He took the blonde man's hand, stopping his nervous fingers. Not yet, Naruto. If you reveal yourself before the enemy shows his true cards, the Konoha Council will blame you for the chaos. You are the Hinshriki of the Kyuubi. Danzo will say that you conspired with the invaders or that you lost control. You have to keep your role. He plays the impulsive fool. I'll be there, covering your blind spots. Naruto looked at Shikami's hand holding his, and then his dark eyes, full of that analytical confidence that was driving him crazy. He smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders. You and me, Nara. Pulling the strings from the shadows. Sounds like an excellent plan to me. The first phase of the Chunin exams took place in classroom 301 of the academy. The instructor, Ibiki Morino, Konoha's head of torture and interrogation, explained the rules in a blood-chilling voice. A 9-question written exam, with a 10th question to be revealed at the end. If you were caught cheating 5 times, your entire team was disqualified. Naruto looked at his exam paper. Advanced cryptography, projectile ballistics with wind resistance, chakra pattern decoding. The level of these questions is not for Genin, Naruto analyzed in a microsecond, without changing his expression of absolute panic. The real purpose of this test is the collection of covert information. They want us to cheat without being detected by the sentries. Evaluating our infiltration and data collection skills. 2 rows away, Shikami was staring at the ceiling. He had already solved the 9 questions in his mind in less than 5 minutes, but he hadn't written anything down. What a bummer, he thought. Naruto must have figured it out by now. I wonder how the idiot will cheat without anyone noticing. Naruto pretended to be sweating profusely, clutching his head and shaking. I could use my chakra sensors to listen to the vibrations of the pencil infiltrated 2 rows ahead. Deciphering the Morse code of his strokes, Naruto calculated. But that doesn't fit my role. Besides, if my hypothesis about the 10th question is correct, the written answers do not matter at all. All this is psychological warfare. Time passed. Sasuke was using his Sharingan to copy another student's pencil movements. Sakura solved the questions on her own thanks to her academic intellect. Finally, Ibiki Morino announced the 10th question. He explained that if they chose to answer it and failed, they would never be able to take the CHN exam again. And it would be Genin for the rest of their lives. If they withdrew now, they could try again next year, but their team would be disqualified today. The room was filled with despair. Dozens of teams raised their hands, surrendering, fearing to destroy their future. The atmosphere was suffocating. Sasuke was trembling, hesitating. Sakura was about to raise her hand for Naruto's sake, believing that the blonde was too stupid to pass, and didn't want to ruin his future. It's time for the show, Naruto decided. And Vicky is measuring the threshold of breaking the wool under lethal pressure. I need to break their psychological genjutsu, keep my team in the game, and reaffirm my brave knucklehead facade. Naruto hit the table with the palm of his hand. The rumble echoed in the great hall, startling everyone. He stood up, pointing at Ibiki with a reckless and furious smile. Don't underestimate me. I'm not going to run, and I'm not going to give up. Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs, even if I have to be a genin for the rest of my life. I will follow my own path to become Hokage. I'm not afraid of you. The silence that followed was absolute. But the heavy air broke. Naruto's raw, loud and seemingly irrational determination infected the rest of the genin. The fear disappeared from the room. Those who stayed hardened their resolve. And Vicky Morino smiled, impressed by the irrational courage of the guy. For those who stayed, they have passed the first phase. Shikami, from her seat, let out a small nasal laugh. He rested his chin on his hands, looking at Naruto's back. Brilliant, you fucking genius. You used fear to your advantage, inspired the entire room, and cemented yourself as the impulsive hero who doesn't think things through. All while giving the right answer to a pure mental toughness test. You played with the mind of the chief of interrogation himself. The second phase was Training Camp 44, the Forest of Death. Instructor Anko Mitaras and handed the Heaven or Earth scrolls to each team. To pass, they had to get the opposite scroll by stealing it from other teams and reach the central tower within 5 days. Team 7 was given the Heaven's scroll. Naruto loudly insisted on carrying it himself, but in a clumsy oversight, he had Sasuke snatch it from him and put it away. Naruto knew that in case of an ambush, the enemy would go for the strongest member of the group first. If Sasuke had the scroll, Naruto would have more freedom of movement to observe and counter. Within a few hours of entering the dense and terrifying forest, the wind changed. A sepulchral silence enveloped the area. The birds stopped singing. A massive wind element jutsu is approaching, Naruto detected, his chakra senses alerting the seconds before the gust hit. A hurricane-force gust shattered the trees around them, separating Team 7. Naruto was thrown away, but in the air, he straightened his posture. Using chakra on the soles of his shoes, he landed vertically on the trunk of a massive tree. That was not a technique of a genin. And the chakra has the same sinister texture that I detected in the village. The leader of the sound. At another point in the forest, Sasuke and Sakura were paralyzed by terror. In front of them was a rain ninja, but after a few seconds, the ninja's face melted, revealing pale skin, snake eyes, and a macabre smile. Orochimaru, the legendary Sannin. Orochimaru released a Saki-killing intent so dense and realistic that Sasuke and Sakura fell to their knees, vomiting, experiencing visions of their own death. Sasuke, the prodigy of the Uchiha, the rookie genius, was crying in fear, unable to move a muscle. He pulled out a kunai and, in an act of pure desperation, tried to stab himself to escape the paralyzing terror. But before the steel touched his skin, two kunai flew out of the undergrowth and crashed into Sasuke's blade, disarming him. Naruto landed in front of them. He was with his back to Sasuke, turning his face to Orochimaru. His body was tense, and the Kyuubi's red chakra was faintly bubbling around him. "Don't you dare give up so easily, fear!" Naruto shouted at Sasuke, using his raspy, hoarse voice to fake animal fury. Orochimaru cocked his head, his viperini tongue tasting the air. "Interesting. The container of the 9 tails. I thought Minato's seal would keep the beast at bay, but it seems that fear awakens the monster." Naruto's mind was working 1,000 times an hour. "Orochimaru, the renegade S-rank ninja, knows the nature of my seal. If I fight with Jotunin tactics, he will find out immediately. If I use the Rasengan, he will know that Hiraya or someone of high level trains me. I have to fight like a wild animal. I must use brute force and unpredictability, and hide my tactical traps within chaotic movements." Orochimaru summoned a giant snake out of nowhere. The massive reptile swooped down to devour Sasuke and Sakura. "Run!" Naruto shouted. Naruto lunged directly at the snake. He did not use complex manual seals. He channeled the fox chakra into his legs and jumped tens of meters into the air. At the height of his jump, instead of throwing a crib and normal, he crossed his arms. Modified shadow clones. "Take this, you fucking snake!" Naruto shouted. Hundreds of shadow clones appeared in the air, but they did not attack with fists. Each clone clung to the giant snake with their hands, using the combined dead weight of hundreds of physical bodies to force the snake's head against the dirt floor, blocking its jaws. Orochimaru widened his smile, fascinated. Brute force and number. How disappointing, but funny. Orochimaru glided like lightning, appearing behind the real Naruto. Her fingers lengthened, infused with dark purple chakra. "Sasuke, react!" Naruto shouted. Sasuke, driven by the shame of seeing the loser protect him, activated his Sharingan and launched into combat. He launched a burst of fire element, Katenrika no Jutsu. Orochimaru effortlessly dodged the flames and counterattacked, mercilessly beating Sasuke into a corner. Naruto, after dispelling the summoned snake, launched himself again. "I need to get him away from Sasuke. He is interested in the Uchiha. If I can't beat him, I should make him lose interest temporarily or delay him," Naruto thought. Naruto attacked Orochimaru in hand-to-hand combat. He threw paws, growling like a beast. Orochimaru blocked every stroke with ease, laughing at the lack of technique. But Orochimaru did not notice that each failed blow of Naruto was leaving small explosive tags hidden in the mud, stuck to the branches and roots around the Sannin, camouflaged with the dust that the red chakra raised. In a lethal move, Orochimaru dodged a blow from Naruto and held him by the neck with his elongated tongue. "You're a nuisance, Orochimaru," hissing Foxboy. "Your wind chakra is strong, but your seal is unstable. Let me fix it." Orochimaru channeled chakra into the 5 fingers of his right hand. Purple flames appeared. Seal of the 5 elements. He recognized Naruto instantly. An S-rank sealing jutsu designed to disrupt the functions of the chakra network and block access to the power of Viju. If I dodge it using the perfect Shunsin or an advanced substitution, I'll give away my level. I'll let him mark me. I can reverse this seal later by applying a reverse password. I have the knowledge to do it. Orochimaru impacted his 5 fingers directly on the seal in Naruto's stomach. The pain was agonizing, even for Naruto. The clash of foreign energies violently closed Kurama's chakra valve, and the blonde felt his own chakra network twisting. He screamed, not pretending, and was thrown through the air, falling unconscious into the lower branches of the forest. Sakura shouted his name and threw a kunai, pinning Naruto by his clothes to a tree to prevent him from crashing to the ground. Sasuke, seeing Naruto fall, finally awakened his true power. With the Sharingan burning, he fought Orochimaru using wire ropes and fire, managing to immobilize the Sannin for a second and burn him alive. But it was useless. Orochimaru shed his skin, coming out of the fire intact. Satisfied with Sasuke's display of power, Orochimaru's neck stretched to an inhuman length, his fangs glowing in the darkness of the forest. And he bit the neck of the fight. The cursed seal of heaven was planted. Sasuke screamed in pain and fell unconscious. Orochimaru smiled, looking at Sakura, who was crying, paralyzed by terror. "Don't worry, girl. Sasuke will look for me for power. I'll see you soon." Orochimaru sank into the earth and disappeared. On the branch where he was hanging, Naruto was not completely unconscious. Through the stabbing pain of the five-element seal, he maintained a strict control over his mind. Damn it! I was careless. I underestimated the strength of the Sannin seal. He has blocked my fine chakra control. If I try to move now, I will collapse. I'll have to trust Sakura and Griga, wait for the reinforcements to arrive. The hours passed. Sakura had moved Sasuke and Naruto to a hollow cave under the roots of a tree. She, terrified and exhausted, kept on guard by cutting her hair to get rid of the clutches of the sound ninja, Kim, who had arrived with her companions, Zeku and Dosu, under orders from Orochimaru to test Sasuke. Rog had tried to help them, but it was brutally defeated by Dosu's sonic jutsus. Sakura was being beaten mercilessly. Everything seemed lost. But on the upper branches, three figures were watching the scene. Shikamenara frowned. She was shaking. And I didn't want to cry when I saw Sasuke unconscious. "Feel. Shikami. What do we do?" She whispered, and no, scared. Those people from the village of sound tore Lee apart like he was a doll. Shikami looked at the cave. His mental Yakugan was at work. The sound equipment. Attacks based on vibrations and changes in air pressure. The leader uses his metal arm to amplify the sound. The girl uses bells and genjutsu. The other wears air tubes on his arms. Then, Shikami's gaze fixed on Naruto. The blonde man lay on the floor, pale, with agitated breathing. Agitated. Naruto never gets knocked down easily. That's not a simple fainting. There is a blockage in your chakra network. Someone of a higher level attacked him, Shikami deduced, and a spark of fury unbecoming of her ignited in his chest. They touched my king. Shikami sighed, closing her eyes. It's a nuisance, Shikami muttered, untying the portekuna and from his leg. And no, prepare the mind transference jutsu. Shh, get ready for the expansion. We're going to save those idiots. Team 10 went into action. Shikami jumped into the clearing in front of the cave. And who are you, little girl? Zeku sneered, raising his tubular arms. Shikami did not answer. He just ducked. Nymph, Kaijimane no Jutsu ninja art, shadow possession jutsu. Shikami's shadow stretched out at the speed of light. Zeku tried to dodge her, but Shikami had calculated the position of the sun and the angle of the tree's roots to bounce the shadow and expand it into a fan shape. In a second, Shikami's shadow connected with Zeku and Dosu's shadows, paralyzing them instantly. Hino, now. Shikami ordered. Hino used his jutsu and took control of Kim's mind, the kunoichi of sound, forcing her to hold a kunai on her own neck. Surrender, or the one with the collar threatened Hino on Kim's body. Dosu, although paralyzed by Shikami's shadow, showed no fear. He smiled under his bandages. You're smart, shadow girl. But you don't understand the level at which we operate. We don't mind sacrificing a pawn to win. Zeku, using the arm that Hino on the body of the one who was aiming at the neck, forced the joint up to an angle, unnatural, and launched a sonic blast directly at point-blank range. The attack hurt Kim herself, and the feedback forced Hino to cancel her jutsu and return to her own body, screaming in pain. With Hino out of combat, Shikami's formation faltered, and Dosu managed to break free of the shadow by sheer brute force. The leader of the sound pounced on Shikami. She pulled out a kunai, bracing herself for impact in a melee where she knew she was at a disadvantage. Internally cursing herself for not foreseeing that her own companions would be sacrificed. But before Dosu's sonic fist reached her, an explosion of purple chakra darkened the cave. Sasuke had woken up. His body was covered with black marks that looked like flames. An aura of pure evil and unnatural power emanated from him. The cursed seal had taken over, feeding on Lucia's fear and hatred. With a brutal and ruthless move, Sasuke grabbed Zaku and dislocated both of his arms, breaking them as if they were dry branches. Zaku's agonized scream echoed through the forest. Dosu, terrified by the monstrous power, stepped back and offered the Earth Scroll as a surrender. Sakura, crying, managed to hug Sasuke and beg him to stop, causing the curse marks to recede and the Uchiha to fall again exhausted. The danger had passed. Team 10, wounded and shocked by Sasuke's brutality, regrouped. Shikami wasn't looking at Lucia. He walked straight into the cave and knelt down next to Naruto's motionless body. He lifted the blonde's shirt. On his stomach, the seal of the 8 trigrams that held the Kyuubi was visible, but around him, a chaotic spiral of 5 dark dots burned the skin. A seal of the 5 elements, Shikami muttered, his tactical and theoretical knowledge identifying the S-level jutsu. This interrupts the circulation. He is choking his chakra flow and mixing the natures. Hino and Chi approached from behind. Sakura was still taking care of Sasuke. Shikami, don't touch that, it looks dangerous, Chi warned. Shikami ignored the warning. He closed his eyes, remembering the theoretical discussions he had had with Naruto during the Shoji games. He had told her about his clan's sealing structure in abstract terms so that she could understand the play of energies. The seal interrupts because it applies odd elements over even elements, Shikami's brilliant mind reasoned. If I cannot remove the seal forcefully, I can try to regulate the pulse by sending a constant flow of neutral chakra and jin. To calm the agitation of the main seal, Shikami placed both hands on Naruto's stomach. She channeled her Inten Shadow Chakra, injecting it with a surgeon's precision into the spaces between the points of the enemy seal, acting as a bridge so that Naruto's own chakra would not collide. It was a painful and exhaustive process. Sweat began to bead on Shikami's forehead. Under his hands, Naruto, who was floating in painful unconsciousness, felt a fresh, analytical, and familiar current guiding his inner chaos. The relief was instantaneous. Slowly, Naruto's blue eyes opened. The first thing he saw was Shikami's focused face, illuminated by the faint light coming into the cave. Naruto blinked. The charade didn't apply here, not as long as she was touching him. You're too smart for your own good, Naruto whispered, his voice husky but steady. Shikami opened her eyes and let out a long sigh, pushing her hands away and letting herself fall sitting on her heels. And you're a suicidal idiot, Uzumaki. Did you let a legendary Sannin apply such a rank seal to you? Did you lose your mind in that fight? Naruto sat down slowly, closing his jacket to hide the seal from the others. Sakura, Hino and Chi were too distracted by Sasuke to listen to their conversation in a low voice. I had no choice. Orochimaru wasn't going to stop playing with me until the fox seal was broken. I had to offer him an easy target for him to incapacitate me and discard me. I knew you guys were close, I felt your chakra signatures an hour ago. I trusted you, Shikami. Shikami looked at him, the weight of that absolute confidence hitting her hard. Her cheeks flushed slightly. What a troublemaker you are. You could have died of chakra exhaustion. Naruto smiled, that genuine and defiant little smile that he dedicated only to her. But I didn't. Thanks for the Jin bridge, Shikami. It was a brilliant maneuver. Not many Jainin would have thought to neutralize a seal of the 5 elements with stabilization instead of brute force. Shikami stood up, shaking the dust off his pants, recovering his lazy attitude. Usual while the others were approaching. I just wanted to sleep without the noise of your irregular breathing disturbing me, Uzumaki. Naruto laughed, rubbing the back of his neck and returning to his role as a noisy fool as he thanked Hino and loudly. But in the exchange of furtive glances before the teams parted to continue towards the tower, the promise between the hidden genius and the lazy shadow became stronger. Both had survived Orochimaru's baptism of fire. The stage of children's tests was over. The preliminaries of the Chunin exams were kept in the central tower, and Naruto Uzumaki was ready to start moving his pieces on the royal board of Konoha, always guided and protected by the only person in the world capable of matching the darkness and the light of his own mind. The interior of the central tower of the Forest of Death smelled damp, sweat, and dried blood. The teams that had managed to survive the second phase of the Chunin exams were lined up in the spacious main hall. In front of the imposing figure of the third cage, Irizen Sarutobi, and a dozen genin and instructors. Naruto Uzumaki was with Sasuke and Sakura. He maintained his stooped posture, with his hands clasped behind the back of his neck and an exaggerated bored expression on his face. However, under that mask, his mind was a hive of tactical calculations and physical pain. The seal of the 5 elements that Orochimaru had embedded in his stomach burned like a hot iron every time he tried to mold chakra. Shikami's intervention in the cave had stabilized his nerve network enough to prevent him from fainting. But his fine chakra control was severely impaired. If I try to use the shadow clone jutsu now, Naruto analyzed, watching the other teams out of the corner of his eye. The chaotic fluctuation of the seal will cause it to consume triple the chakra to create a single copy. I can't depend on ninjutsu. I will have to win my fights based on pure tactical deception and taijutsu, which fits perfectly with my facade of an impulsive fighter. His gaze momentarily met Shikami's, who was standing next to his team. She did not smile or nod, but her dark eyes, half closed by apparent laziness, conveyed a clear message to him: observe and analyze. Don't expose yourself. Ala Tayet, a genin with a sickly appearance and deep dark circles, took a step forward after the Okage's speech. He coughed a couple of times before he spoke. Kef. Because too many teams have passed the second stage, we will be holding individual preliminary matches to reduce the number of participants before the finals. Kef. The rules are simple. The combat ends when one dies, surrenders, or I decide that it cannot continue. The electronic board will decide the pairings randomly. The tension in the room shot up. Sakura, exhausted and worried about Sasuke's curse mark, begged her partner to withdraw. Kabuto Yakushi, Orochimaru's spy disguised as Genin of the Blade, had already raised his hand to retreat, claiming exhaustion. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he saw Kabuto leaving. A veteran medical ninja who survives the Forest of Death without a single scratch and retires just before single combats. Feigned cowardice. His chakra network was dense and controlled. He's a spy, probably from the same snake that attacked us in the forest. I'll keep an eye on him. The electronic board on the wall came to life, the names flashing at high speed, until they stopped in the first Sasuke Uchiha verses. Yoro and aka. The other Genin and Kotanin went up to the upper balconies to observe. Naruto leaned on the metal railing, paying close attention. I knew that Sasuke was at his limit. The cursed seal on his neck pulsed with a dark energy that Naruto could clearly perceive. The match was quick but revealing. Yoro possessed a chakra absorption technique through her palms, which forced Sasuke to rely exclusively of his taijutsu. Despite the agonizing pain of Orochimaru's mark, Lucci's raw talent shone through as he copied the Rogal move he had seen days earlier, creating the Shishiren Lion's Flurry. Sasuke won, but Kakashi immediately took him away to seal the cursed mark. The containment seal that Kakashi will apply will only work if Sasuke has the will to resist Orochimaru's power, Naruto calculated. But Sasuke's ego and his obsession with revenge against his brother Itachi are his weakness. Orochimaru offered him power, and Sasuke will end up looking for it. I'll have to prepare countermeasures for the day Sasuke tries to defect. The fighting continued. Shino Aburame defeated Zaku of Sound, destroying his air implants with insects. Canker of the Sand broke the bones of Orochimaru's spy Mizumi using his puppet. And then, the board stopped Shikami Nara versus Kintsuchi. Shikami let out an audible and exasperated sigh. He scratched the back of his neck, and walked heavily towards the stairs. What a bummer. I'd rather be sleeping, Shikami muttered, going down to the sand. Naruto leaned over the railing, his blue eyes fixed on the girl in the shadows. And no Ensh were shouting encouraging words at him from the balcony, but Shikami ignored them. In front of her, Kintsuchi, the kunoichi of sound, was smiling arrogantly, pulling out a pair of bond needles, from which small bells were hanging. You don't seem very enthusiastic, Konoha girl, Kim teased. I'll do you a favor and get this over with quickly so you can go to sleep. Begin, he indicated to Yate. Kim released her needles immediately. The sound of jingle bells echoed in the great hall. Naruto observed Kim's chakra flow. They are not simple throwing weapons. He is injecting a chakra thread of Jin element into the sound frequencies of the bells to create an auditory genjutsu. It will affect Shikami's balance center in the inner ear and distort his visual perception. A basic confusion tactic, but lethal if not deactivated in time. On the sand, Shikami dodged the first needles with minimal and lazy movements, but the sound had already begun to take effect. Kim launched a second flurry of needles. Shikami dodged the physical needle, but did not see another needle, invisible, that Kim had thrown in her blind spot, using the sound to distract her. The needle grazed Shikami's arm, cutting it slightly. You're seeing illusions, aren't you? Kim laughed, getting ready for the final blow. You think I'm in a place, but the sound deceives you. Shikami closed her eyes and sighed. He crouched down, clasping his hands on a specific seal of the Nara clan. Nimp. Kaijimane no Jutsu, Ninja Art Shadow Possession Jutsu. Shikami's shadow stretched towards Kim, but the kunoichi of the sound just jumped back, evading her with ease. That's all. Your shadows are too slow. Kim shouted, throwing more needles. On the balcony, Asuma smiled, exhaling smoke from his cigarette. Naruto, for his part, couldn't stop a small, genuine smile from crossing his lips, quickly, hidden under a fake concentration grimace. The girl with the sound is a fool, Naruto thought. She hasn't realized that Shikami isn't trying to catch her with a frontal attack. He is measuring the maximum length of his shadow in this enclosed environment. Shikami continued to send his shadow in seemingly unsuccessful attacks, forcing Kin to retreat step by step towards the edge of the combat arena. You're finished. Kin threw 3 needles directly at vital points. But at that instant, Shikami's shadow did not stretch straight. He moved to the side, merging with a darker and denser shadow. Naruto looked up. The preliminary stadium was illuminated by large windows and artificial lights on the roof. But Alatayet, the referee, was standing to one side, and his body was casting a long shadow on the stone floor. Shikami's shadow joined the referee's shadow, instantly lengthening its effective range, and then shot out at a 90-degree angle, catching Kim's feet just as she was landing after launching her attack. Kim's needles stopped in midair, her muscles paralyzed by the Nara clan's control. So what? What is this? I can't move. Kim shouted, struggling uselessly. Shikami stood up, his expression denoting pure boredom. You moved exactly where I wanted. The shadows in this room are fixed. I just had to guide you to the intersection line. Naruto nodded imperceptibly from the balcony. Check. But the sound girl is still conscious. How will he force her to surrender without long-range weapons? Shikami pulled out a kunai. And due to the shadow possession jutsu, Kim was forced to imitate the move, also taking out a kunai from her gun holder. Shikami raised his arm and threw the kunai forward. Kim, reflecting the movement, did exactly the same. Both kunai flew through the air and crossed paths, but the position in the arena was not symmetrical. Shikami was standing several meters away from the stone wall. Kim, however, had his back to within millimeters of the hard retaining wall. Shikami abruptly leaned back, bending her body into an arc to dodge the crib, and that Kim had thrown at her. Kim, forced to imitate the backward tilt, threw her head and torso violently back. The crackle of Kim's chant crashing into the solid stone wall echoed in the sand. The sound kunoichi fell to the ground, completely unconscious before she even realized that he had hit her. Shikami undid his seal, sighing. too troublesome. The winner is Shikami Nara, he announced Yatahak. The cheers echoed in the hall, although most of the genin were disturbed by the analytical coldness of the victory. Shikami went up the stairs to the balconies. As he passed by Naruto, he didn't stop his step, but his shoulders brushed against each other for a split second. "Not bad, strategist," Naruto muttered in such a low tone that not even Kiba, a few meters away, could hear him. "Easy peasy, Hidden King. Let's see what you do now," Shikami replied in an equally imperceptible whisper, before joining Asuma and Shk. The fighting continued. And Mata Yuga, the timid heiress of the clan, was brutally torn apart by her cousin Neji, who used the soft fist Jotaken to destroy her chakra network and internal organs. Naruto, maintaining his character, shouted at Neji furiously, earning the Yuga's hatred and the silent admiration of his companions. Finally, the electronic dashboard flashed again, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kiba and Nuzuka. Naruto tensed up. He clenched his fists and smiled with forced arrogance. "Finally, it's my turn," he screamed, jumping over the railing and landing awkwardly in the combat arena. Kiba, accompanied by his dog Kamaru, came down the stairs laughing loudly. "How lucky I am. I had to fight the loser of the class." He mopped up Kiba, bumping his fists. "This will be over in a second, Akamaru." The little dog barked in agreement. Naruto got into combat position. Internally, his mind operated at levels of analysis that were terrifying. Kiba in Yuzuka. Combat style based on beastly taijutsu. Extreme agility and attacks in tandem with his ninja dog. His main advantage is not strength, but his altered senses. And Inyuzuka's sense of smell in combat is amplified thousands of times to track chakra and position of the enemy. Naruto felt a twinge of pain in his stomach. Orochimaru's 5-element seal was bubbling, interrupting his energy flow. "If I use the Shadow Clone Jutsu now, I will consume 3 times more chakra than normal because of the fluctuation, and if I get weak, Kiba and his dog give me. They will destroy with fang on fang. I can't use pure force. I have to use his greatest strength against him. Are you guys ready?" he asked Yate. "Start." Kiba didn't waste any time. He threw a soldier pill at Kamaru, whose fur turned red and his size increased. "J. Jinbunsen. Beastman clone," Kiba shouted. Akamaru transformed, adopting the exact appearance of Kiba. Now there were 2 wild Kaibas in the sand. Both of them rushed towards Naruto at an impressive speed. "Suga. Piercing Fang." Kiba and Akamaru began to turn on themselves as destructive drills. Naruto jumped to the side, narrowly dodging the first impact that shattered the stone on the ground. He pretended to stumble, falling backwards and rolling desperately as the drills chafed past his clothes. Kakashi watched from the balcony with concern. Sakura was shouting Naruto's name. Shikami, on the other hand, kept his eyes narrowed, analyzing the blonde's every move. Naruto is not stumbling out of clumsiness, Shikami noticed. He's guiding Kiba. Their erratic jumps are forcing the Inyuzuka to rotate in a closed circular pattern in the center of the arena. "What are you up to, Naruto?" In the arena, Naruto took out several kunai and shurikens, throwing them in a seemingly desperate and random way. Some kunai were nailed to the walls, others to the floor. "It's no use, loser. You're too slow," Kiba taunted, stopping his spin for an instant before preparing for the final attack. Naruto was panting, holding his knees, with a panicked expression on his face. But in his mind, the fox's smile was shining. "I have 5 strands of ultra-thin ninja wire, transparent to the naked eye, tied to the kunai that I failed. I have woven a triangular net half a meter from the ground or around its attack zone. Now, the final blow. Let's get rid of him, Akamaru." "The double-sk," Kiba shouted, jumping into the air along with his transformed dog, preparing to fall like twin missiles on Naruto. Naruto stood still. In the last millisecond, as Kiba and Akamaru were descending, Naruto formed a single-hand seal and channeled a light flow of chakra into his throat. It wasn't a big jutsu, but it required precise control, something he could do even with the faulty seal. He violently pulled the invisible threads in his hands. The ninja threads suddenly tensed in the air, creating a tropical cable. Lethal fish tank. Kiba and Akamaru, in the middle of a spinning fall, crashed into the threads at full speed. The momentum of their own technique threw them off balance brutally. Their spinning bodies became entangled in the air, bumping into each other with a thudding sound. They both fell to the ground, stunned by the shock. But Kiba was resilient. He stood up, dizzy and furious, his nose searching for Naruto amidst the kicked-up dust. "You fucking cheater. You'll pay me for them." Kiba growled, sniffing the air frantically. Naruto, who had retreated to get out of the attack range, knew that the physical blow was not enough. Here comes the masterstroke. Naruto feigned absolute exhaustion, bending over himself, and at that moment, he emitted a grotesque and loud sound. A deafening fart. The whole stadium went silent. Sakura covered her face with shame. Kakashi sighed. Even the Okage blinked, bewildered by the lack of dignity of the combat. Kiba, whose sense of smell was amplified thousands of times, inhaled the flatulence full on. But it was not a simple digestive please. During the herb gathering in the Forest of Death days ago, Naruto had ingested and accumulated in his digestive system a specific combination of aconitum fences and swamp sulfur leaves. Using his chakra, he had kept the chemical reaction contained in his gut, waiting for the exact moment to release her. The smell was so overpowering, so toxic on an olfactory level, that for Kiva's hyperdeveloped sense of smell, it was like receiving a tear gas bomb in its purest form directly into the brain. Kiva let out a scream of agony, clutching his nose, his eyes filled with tears, his brain collapsing from sensory overload. He doubled over on the ground, completely unable to fight, vomiting and writhing. Akamaru, having the same level of smell, fainted on the spot, reversing his transformation to a small puppy. Taking advantage of the absolute openness, Naruto did not waste a second of his character. "That was an accident," Naruto shouted, feigning embarrassment, as he ran towards Kiba with his newly created shadow clones. Uzumaki Renden. Uzumaki Burst. With a series of basic but effective kicks, Naruto and his clones lifted a stunned and blind Kiba into the air, finishing him off with an axe kick that smashed him into the sandstone. Kiba was knocked unconscious, rolling his eyes, defeated by a flatulence and a beating from shadow clones. The silence in the stadium was so dense that you could hear the dust settling. Alatayet, coughing slightly to hide her disbelief, raised her hand. "The winner is Naruto Uzumaki." On the balconies, the reaction was pure anime disgust and disbelief. Sakura was smacking her forehead, muttering about what an idiot her partner was. And he didn't hold his nose complaining about the lack of elegance. Only 3 people in that room understood what had really happened. Kakashi narrowed his one eye. That network of invisible wires was assembled during his seemingly clumsy stumbles. And that accumulation of gases. It couldn't have been a coincidence at the exact moment Kiba was inhaling to track him down. Naruto used his enemy's physiology to create the most lethal and humiliating weapon possible. The third Kage smiled behind his pipe, remembering the unorthodox but brilliant tactics of Naruto's mother, Kushina Uzumaki. But it was Shikamaru to whom he could not help, but a proud little smile was drawn on his face. Leaning against the balcony wall, she looked at Naruto as the blonde celebrated loudly in the arena. Biological chemical engineering, disguised as a 12-year-old's scatological prank, Shikami thought, fascination dancing in his dark eyes. "You're a tactical demon, Naruto. A fucking demon disguised as a buffoon." Minutes later, Naruto walked up the stairs to the balcony seating area. His teammates ignored him, still embarrassed by his method of victory, and concentrated on the next matches, where Energia had just defeated Hinata and Rogel was preparing to face Gaara of the Desert. Naruto walked towards the shadows of the back hallway, pretending to go to the bathroom. As he rounded the stone corner, away from the curious stares and the instructors, his posture changed drastically. His shoulders relaxed, his buffoonish smile disappeared, replaced by a controlled grimace of pain. He leaned against the cold stone wall, slightly lifting his jacket and pressing one hand against his stomach. on the seal of the 5 elements that burned like fire under his skin. If you keep using shadow clones with that active seal, your chakra network will collapse due to internal friction. Shikami's soft, calm voice echoed in the gloom. Naruto looked up. Shikami was leaning against the opposite wall, with her arms crossed and a bottle of fresh water in one hand. He threw the bottle at her with a casual movement. Naruto caught it on the fly and drank it gratefully. He needed the distraction of the clones for the final blow. And don't worry, my tenant's red chakra is healing the micro-tears in my network as we speak. Naruto sighed, closing his eyes for a second. Although I admit that it hurts like hell. Shikami approached him, stopping less than a meter away. He raised one hand and, with a delicacy that contrasted with his usual laziness, traced the outline of Naruto's shoulder. That cable network was brilliant. You forced a perfect inertial shock. But that stink bomb. Shikami let out a small laugh. Genuine, that was just disgusting. Brilliant, but gross. Naruto smiled back at her, that warm, sharp smile he was only dedicating to her. The art of deception requires sacrifices, Nara. Everyone thinks I'm a no-manners pig with a devil's luck. No one will investigate a biological accident. My secret is still safe. Shikamiya felt his gaze turning would be. You need to fix that seal before the finals, Naruto. If the preliminaries finish today, they will give us a month of training before the main event at the stadium. Open. If you are facing someone like the Nijiryuga or the psychopath of the arena with such a block, tactical deception will not be enough. They will kill you with one lethal blow if you can't use your real speed and chakra. I know, Naruto clenched his fist. I know the theory to undo a seal of the 5 elements, but it requires the same amount of concentrated chakra that Orochimaru used. I need a Sannin or someone of Kage level to apply the password. If I ask the 3rd Kage to Kakashi for help, they will ask me how I know about the existence and nature of the seal. They'll start digging. Then you need to find someone from outside the regular military chain of command of Konoha Rizuno Shikami quickly, his analytical mind weaving the solution. Someone strong enough, but eccentric enough not to ask diplomatic questions. Naruto looked at her, admiration overflowing in his blue eyes. She complimented him perfectly. Where he put strength and raw cunning, she brought order and long-term strategy. I will look for a Toad Master, Naruto said in a whisper, remembering some forbidden scrolls he had read about the nets of Konoha's espionage. The perverted sage, Jiraiya. If anyone has the power, and the lack of protocols, to fix this stamp for me for the right price, it's him. He should be in the village to gather information during the exams. Shikami smiled and moved a little closer, resting her forehead against Naruto's shoulder. The contact was warm and comforting in the cold stone corridor of the tower. Be careful, Uzumaki. The Sannin are unpredictable monsters. Orochimaru has already left a mark on you. Naruto raised his hand, stroking Shikami's dark hair tenderly, an intimate gesture. That contrasted violently with the carnage going on in the arena a few meters away, where the arena Hinshriki, Gaara, was about to crush Rogel's bones. He was surviving the snake, Shikami. The toad will be child's play. They both stood in silence for a few seconds, enjoying the refuge that the other represented. They weren't heroes saving the world. They were 2 teenagers too smart for their own age, playing shadow warfare in a village that didn't understand them. I have to get back to the balcony before Asuma notices that I disappeared. Shikami, reluctantly separating from him. Try not to do any other humiliating stupid things, please. Naruto laughed softly, adjusting his ninja band. I promise nothing, my shadow. When the preliminaries concluded, the pairings for the tournament final in a month were decided. Naruto would face the genius of the Yuga clan, Neji. Shikami was paired against Temari from the arena. Sasuke against Gaara of the desert. The board was set up. The pieces had taken their positions. And during that month of training, Naruto Uzumaki was preparing to search for the legendary Sannin and unlock the true terror of his hidden power, while Shikamenara was fine-tuning her mind for the chaos they both knew was coming. Let loose in Konoha. The veil of lies was about to be torn, and when the blood ran, the hidden genius and the lazy shadow, would be the only ones standing, ruling the board. The month of training leading up to the CHN exam finals stretched out like a vast ocean of possibilities. For most genin, it was a time to perfect a single jutsu or improve their physical endurance. For Naruto Uzumaki, it was a race against the clock to regain absolute control of his own power grid and prepare for the covert war that was coming. The first step of his strategy required finding the legendary Sannin of the Toads. Naruto knew that he couldn't just search the streets for Jiraiya asking for him. A spy of that rank doesn't let himself be found unless he wants to. So Naruto turned to pure logic and patterns of human behavior. According to the classified files he had accessed on his nightly raids into the library, Jiraiya already had two major weaknesses: information gathering and the beautiful women. Naruto headed to the Konoha public hot springs. Hidden in the branches of a tree near the women's toilets, he didn't have to wait long. A sturdy figure with an immense white mane and mittens clothes was crouching on the bamboo wall, peeking through a crack with a notebook in his hand, laughing low with a perverted laugh. The great Sannin of the Toads, my father's teacher. What a pathetic picture, Naruto thought, feeling a mixture of disappointment and relief. But this makes it predictable. Naruto didn't jump up screaming to confront him. Instead, he formed a silent seal. He heard that not sexy jutsu, he whispered. In a cloud of smoke, Naruto transformed into a stunning blonde woman, shrouded only in mist, and casually walked towards Jiraiya's position. At the sight of her, the Sannin let out a stifled scream, and a stream of blood shot out of his nose, throwing him backwards, and making him fall resoundingly from the wall. Naruto undid the transformation immediately, turning back into a 12-year-old boy, and approached the Sannin. Stunned, crossing his arms with an expression of feigned indignation. "Hey, you old pervert!" Naruto shouted in his usual squeaky voice, "You almost crushed me. I was looking for my sensei, Ebisu, and you knocked him unconscious earlier. Now you have to train me yourself." Jiraiya already got up, rubbing his head and wiping the blood from his nose. He looked at the blonde brat. Her eyes widened slightly as she noticed the whisker marks on his cheeks and the shiny blonde hair. "Minato," thought the Sannin, but quickly hid his surprise under a Fanarona smile. "I train you, noisy brat. I am the great toad hermit, not a nanny. Get lost. If you don't train me, I'll go tell the old lady who manages the baths that the legendary Sannin Jiraiya is a cheap peeping Tom who drools over the village girls," he threatened Naruto, pointing accusingly at him. Jiraiya turned pale. Reputation was somewhat malleable, but the fury of the women of Konoha was a force of nature. Besides, the curiosity to see how far the son of his brightest pupil had come gnawed at him. It's okay. Don't scream," Jiraiya sighed, walking up to the boy and looking at him with his sharp eye. "But if I'm going to train you, let's see what you got, Uzumaki." They both headed to a nearby river. Naruto took off his orange jacket. "My chakra control is ruined. I can't walk on water without falling," Naruto complained, feigning frustration. "A few days ago in the Forest of Death, a pale guy with a snake tongue hit me in the stomach, and since then I can't concentrate." Jiraiya already tensed up instantly. "Orochimaru? Let's see, lift up the shirt," ordered the Sannin, his tone losing all the perverted joke. Naruto obeyed. On his stomach, the seal of the 5 elements shone with a sickly purple hue around the original seal of the Kyuubi. Jiraiya clicked his tongue. Orochimaru applied an odd element stamp to it over an even element stamp. "It's blocking your access to the fox chakra and disrupting your own flow." The poor boy must be feeling constant pain, but he hides it well. "This is an advanced seal, brat. It's normal for your chakra to be a mess." Jiraiya channeled chakra into the 5 fingers of his right hand, lighting small blue flames at the tips. "Take a deep breath. This is going to hurt. Gogikain." Unsealing of the 5 elements. Jiraiya impacted his hand directly on Naruto's stomach. The pain was sharp and searing, as if a thorn had been torn out and stuck directly into his nerve ducts. Naruto let out a stifled scream and fell to his knees, coughing, but in the darkness of his mind. The immense door of Kurama's cage opened slightly again. The massive, warm, and familiar chakra of the beast. With cola flowed back into his network, stabilizing his energy coils almost instantly. The relief was so immense that Naruto had to bite his tongue to keep from sighing with pleasure. Try to walk on water, Jiraiya instructed him now. Naruto, hiding his technical perfection, ran to the river. At first, he pretended to stagger, injecting some irregular chakra into his left foot, then visibly correcting it. He managed to stand on the surface of the water, laughing and celebrating with his arms in the air. Jiraiya smiled. He's a quick learner. Once the obstacle was removed, his body instinctively found balance. She's a diamond in the rough, just like Kushina. For the next 2 weeks, Hirai already focused on a single goal: to teach Naruto the Kuchio Senjutsu jutsu of summoning. To do this, he made him sign the blood contract with the toads of Mount Meiboku. The Sannin explained the theory to him. He was to need chakra, offer blood as tribute, and use the corresponding seals to connect the spacetime between Konoha and the Toad Kingdom. For Naruto, theory was child's play. The Effenjutsu of the contract was a simple matrix of dimensional coordinates. What was really difficult was pretending that it was hard for him to do it. In his first attempts, he summoned tadpoles and small toads that could barely speak. Jiraiya would scold him and call him a talentless idiot. And Naruto was complaining loudly. But in the solitude of the night, after Hirai had already left to investigate the bars, Naruto would go to his clearing in the forest and perfect the technique. He was calculating the exact amount of chakra pressure needed to stabilize the summoning channel. On his 3rd day of secret practice, he managed to summon a toad the size of a 2-story building. He immediately dismissed it so as not to attract attention. He knew how to use jutsu. But he also knew that Jiraiya wanted to force him to use the red chakra of the fox. The decisive day came when Jiraiya, losing patience with his student's apparent uselessness, took Naruto to the top of an abysmal ravine. Fear is the key to unleashing your survival instinct and the chakra that sleeps inside, Jiraiya said, with an icy expression. And without warning, he pushed Naruto off the cliff. Naruto fell in free fall towards the rocky bottom. The wind whistled in his ears. He could have survived by simply channeling wind element chakra to cushion the fall or using shadow clones as a ladder. But this was what the Sannin wanted. In the fall, Naruto closed his eyes and immersed himself in his mental landscape. The huge flooded sewer. The gigantic metal grilles with the paper stamp in the center. Behind them, 2 red, malevolent eyes, the size of houses, were watching him in the gloom. "You're coming to borrow my power so you don't get crushed to death, tadpole," Kurama growled, his voice making the water vibrate at Naruto's feet. Naruto did not shrink from fear. He kept his posture straight, looking the fox straight in the eyes. He did not adopt the idiot mask. Here, in the face of the embodiment of hatred, there was no room for lies. "I didn't come to beg, hairball," Naruto replied, his voice cold and calculated. "You are sealed inside of me. If I die against those rocks, you die with me, and it will take years to reform. This is simple logic. Pay your host the rent for living in my stomach." The Kyuubi narrowed his eyes, surprised by the brat's cold arrogance. He was not the frightened child or the noisy fool that the fox saw through Naruto's eyes in the outside world. He was a strategist threatening a god. Kurama let out a deep laugh that shook the cage. "You've got guts, brat. We'll see what you do with it." The red chakra, dense and boiling, seeped through the bars, enveloping Naruto. In the real world, just a few meters from crashing into the bottom of the ravine, Naruto's eyes suddenly opened, tinted scarlet red, and with vertical pupils. He bit his thumb until it bled, traced the seals with blinding speed, and stamped his hand against the stone wall of the ravine. Kuchio Senjutsu. An immense cloud of white smoke exploded in the abyss, so great that it rose above the level of the ravine. Hirai was already watching from above, holding his breath. From the smoke emerged the imposing and massive figure of Gamabunta, the Toad Chief, with his pipe in his mouth, and his gigantic Gwakizashi sword at his waist. And over the head of the immense invocation, there was Naruto, panting, apparently exhausted and terrified, pretending to have fainted from the effort. Jiraiya smiled broadly. "You did it, brat. You are worthy." While Naruto was perfecting his covert control with Jiraiya at the Nara clan compound, Shikami was dealing with his own preparations. The inner courtyard of the Nara house was quiet. Shikami and his father, Shikaku, the Jotunan commander of Konoha, were sitting in front of a shogi board. Shikaku moved his golden general, cornering Shikami's pawn. "You've been distracted lately," Shikami commented. Shikaku, rubbing her goatee. "Since the preliminaries, your playing style has changed. You used to be purely defensive, luring the enemy into a trap. But today, you have sacrificed 3 vital pieces to open a direct attack line towards my king. It's an aggressive style. Chaotic. As if someone else had taught you how to play." Shikami did not take his eyes off the board. His dark eyes were analyzing his father's training. With a quick and decisive movement, he moved his bishop, crossing the entire board and blocking Shikaku's escape route. Supported by a tower that he had hidden in the rear from the start. "Checkmate, Dad," she said, with absolute calm. Shikaku opened his eyes wide, studying the board. He was cornered. The trap had been so subtle, camouflaged under a series of seemingly clumsy suicide attacks, that even he hadn't seen it coming. Until it was too late. That final move. Shikaku looked at her, intrigued. It was not a movement at all. It was an attack of mass distraction, followed by a lethal blow to a blind spot. Shikami got up and stretched lazily, yawning. The defensive strategy only works when the rules of the game are respected, Dad. But sometimes, the rules change. You have to be able to use your opponent's chaos to your advantage. What a bummer to have to explain it. While walking to his room, Shikami dropped the facade of laziness. His mind was working at the limit. The pieces were falling into place. He had noticed that the shinobi in the arena were covertly moving medical supplies and explosives into the visitors' accommodations. Gaara, the Hinshriki, was more unstable than ever. The invasion is imminent. It will happen during the finals, when the daimyo and the Okage are in the main box, Shikami deduced. My father and the Jainin are suspicious, but they don't have enough evidence to cancel the exam without a problem. Causing a diplomatic incident. The attack will happen. He came to his room and took out a blank scroll, a brush and ink. He began to design variations of his shadow possession jutsu. He understood that, in a large-scale war within the village, he would immobilize only one target at a time. It wouldn't be enough. I needed area traps. He drew mathematical formulas to calculate the reflection and refraction of light using smoke bombs and mirrors, creating artificial shadow fields that would allow him to trap dozens of enemies at once. Naruto will be the main target if he reveals himself to be a combat genius or if the Kyuubi reacts to the sand beast, Shikami thought. His chest tightening slightly with a concern that would not allow him to admit out loud. I have to make sure I'm in control of the battlefield by the time he decides to take the mask off. The night before the finals of the Chunin exam, the sky over Konoha was clear, illuminated by an immense moon. In the hidden clearing of the forest, Naruto and Shikami met for the last time before the tournament. There was no shogi board tonight. The gravity of what was going to happen tomorrow permeated the air. Naruto arrived in silence, wearing his orange clothes, but his posture was straight and his gaze as sharp as the steel of a kune. Shikami was already waiting for him, sitting on the branch of her usual oak, sharpening a kune with a water stone. I learned how to summon giant toads, Naruto said as a greeting, crossing his arms. I could have done it on the first day, but it took me 2 weeks to convince Jiraiya that I almost died, trying to make him believe that it is a product of effort under pressure. Shikami put the crib away and jumped off the branch, landing in front of him. The invasion will be tomorrow, Naruto. The sand and the sound are allied. The main objective is to assassinate the third cage in the box during the climax of the matches. The trigger will probably be Sasuke's match against Gaara. Naruto nodded, his mind synchronizing with hers perfectly. If the case cage and the third cage are in the box, Orochimaru will surely disguise himself. And if Gaara releases his tailed beast in the middle of the stadium, the civilian casualties will be catastrophic. I have prepared chi and not under the pretext of team tactics so that they are ready for an ambush, Shikami informed. But I can't protect everyone. Naruto took a step towards her, cutting the distance. His hand found Shikami's, interlacing his fingers tightly. You don't have to protect everyone, Shikami. Just stay safe yourself. As soon as the invasion starts, my role as the noisy idiot in the class dies. I will not allow them to destroy our village. Shikami looked at him. At that moment, I didn't see the last one dead, not even the 12-year-old the world thought it knew. He saw the commander who would one day rule the elemental nations. I saw the king on his board. Tomorrow you will face Nijiryuga in the first match, she reminded him, her voice dropping in tone. Becoming an intimate whisper in the silent forest. His Yakugan sees everything. See your chakra network, your vital points. Don't try a brute force combat, Naruto. He blindly believes in fate, believes that people cannot change. Naruto smiled, and his blue eyes shone with a defiant and cunning light. Fate is a lie that weak people use to justify their laziness, Shikami. Tomorrow, I'm going to use your absolute trust in those white eyes against you. I'm going to shatter their beliefs in front of the whole stadium. Shikami raised his free hand, stroking the blond man's cheek. Kill him with frustration, Uzumaki. Naruto leaned over and kissed her. It was an urgent kiss, charged with the adrenaline of the impending battle and the silent promise of survival. Shikami fired back at him, her arms around his neck, anchoring him to reality before the world descended into chaos. When they parted, breathing heavily, Naruto gave her one last deep look. See you on the battlefield, my shadow. The Konoha Open Stadium roared like a thousand-headed monster. Tens of thousands of spectators filled the stands in the blazing midday sun. In the box of honor, the third cage, Irizen Sarutobi was sitting next to the arena cage, whose eyes were hidden under the shadows of his hat. Below, in the immense combat arena of dirt and grass, referee Genma Shiranui, with his characteristic senbon in his mouth, took a step back. The first match of the finals of the Chen exam. Naruto Uzumaki versus Neji Yuga. Let's get started. Neji did not immediately adopt a fighting stance. He stood there, his arms relaxed, and his white eyes fixed on Naruto with utter contempt. Give up now, loser, Neji said, his cold, condescending voice echoing in the initial silence of the stadium. My eyes see your destiny. You were a failure in the academy, and you're a failure now. Fate decided that you would lose this match before you even set foot in the arena. An outcast cannot defeat a